Alright, I think we are live. Welcome back to the stream. We happen to have this noise in the background of Tuco eating his cat food, so I figure I should at least give folks the visuals of that too while I'm introducing the stream. So this is going to be a bit of a continuation of the kind of Sunday streams we've been doing a couple times now on reducing your dependency on big tech in a way that's kind of approachable for all of us where we're at, but also talking about like just stuff that we're interested in that sphere, trying to start conversations with what we know, but collect info from all of you. So welcome. I'm going to start with a bit of stuff on PeerTube and our kind of ongoing maintenance of diode.zone, and then move on to some current events and play with and talk about secure Scuttlebutt a little bit. So it looks like we are live on the usual places. We're on YouTube at the Scanlime-in-progress channel. There's also the Twitch stream at twitch.tv/scanlime, which looks like we're live there too. You can also get the bits directly from the source at live.diode.zone/scanlime. And if you are in need of any of these various links, they're usually hanging out at the top of the screen. But also, this is, in that direction, my friend Z is joining us for the stream too, in the form of the trash can over there. So,
hey folks.
Maybe we can put Tuco in a smaller window and have some computering as well. So the context of a lot of this stuff that I've been doing lately, both the kind of really technical in the weeds stuff with the sandbox project and some of the slightly higher level projects like just maintaining a server and trying to build a not terrible little community of video posters there. Like a lot of that is part of this broader goal of trying to be less dependent on these monopolies we find ourselves around. And we've talked about many of the reasons why you might want to avoid them, both for kind of personally having more control over your situation, but also not enabling the larger scale problems that they're part of quite so much. And so there are a lot of ways that you could approach that depending on what your priorities are and what your kind of immediate needs are, just like what's important to you. One of the things that I wanted to focus on a little bit was video, and so part of that comes from just like, I don't know, like childhood fascinations with TV stations and stuff like that. But part of it's also just frustration with, you know, how much joy YouTube and Twitch can suck out of something that I might otherwise enjoy. This feeling that like I would love to produce video for all of you, but not necessarily produce video for YouTube, the corporation, or, you know, Google, the Omnicorp. So it's much more interesting to me if I can make video that's just like internet video in general, available via multiple platforms, and not be a YouTuber or a Twitch creator or whatever. I still feel maybe some hopefully useful amount of nostalgia for the parts of the internet that were more decentralized before they got conglomerated so much. So one of the concrete things here, I mentioned PeerTube. If you're not familiar with PeerTube, it's basically just a piece of open source software that you can run on your own server, or you can find somebody else who runs it on their server. And it's a way to have a video site that is smaller than the entire internet, but potentially bigger than just a single server. You can have servers that share content and to some extent share bandwidth. So it's a little bit more like the older days of like IRC servers that could link up with each other, and you know, they were still fairly independent entities, but they had some ways of sharing data from server to server so that you could have like kind of bridges between communities that way. So there was kind of an interesting milestone coming up where I was just looking into, I was actually debugging an unrelated issue on PeerTube. I was trying to look into an upload problem one of my users was having, and it I didn't really totally get to the bottom of what that upload problem was, but it just seems like there had been a bunch of improvements in the upload code since then, and I was falling behind. And so looking at the repository, they're actually really close to releasing their 3.0 release. I'm a little skeptical of the versioning on PeerTube because it still feels like a very kind of early project on the whole. And so I'm used to like large version numbers, meaning something is a little bit more battle tested or whatever, but it's gonna hit 3.0 or something next. 2.4 is the latest release, and I guess that's pretty close to what Diode Zone is still running. But there's a 3.0 RC1 tagged in the repository, and so I was just merging that into my tree and trying that out on my test server. So Diode Zone's over here, if you're not familiar with that. It's, I don't know if I was going to look at it right away, but it's got a bunch of things. And then I have this little PeerTube instance just set up for testing. This is not publicly reachable, so don't worry about trying to access the URL. But I've been using this one to just test different versions of PeerTube, and they do have live stream support. I was going to see if I could do a quick demo of it, just to show everyone like that it does work and it is real. It's not polished right now, but you know, it's kind of consistent with the quality that I am used to from PeerTube at this point, so it's not a big surprise. It works, and I'm glad that it exists, and I am a little frustrated looking at the code, but I kind of still want to design something that's compatible with it and maybe offers additional video storage options. Because at least from my impression so far, they added yet another video storage format in this endeavor to add live streams. So previously, there were kind of two different storage methods you could use for videos. There was like the traditional WebTorrent compatible method, and then there's a different method that's not actually really compatible with WebTorrents, but uses a different peer-to-peer mechanism, and that one's actually much faster to load because you don't have to load nearly as much index data for the whole video before you can just start to play it. So there's already this like weird technical trade-off that then requires you to basically spend twice the storage space on your videos, and then they made it even more complicated by adding an additional format for in-process live streams. So that's a thing that I'm not entirely happy with, but I'm glad that it works, and it would be cool. It'd be cool if we had some more options for like back-end pieces that we could like remix in with the existing servers. And maybe some new UI pieces we could remix in with that. So this is what the UI normally looks like for uploading to PeerTube. This is being cut off a little bit by the cat. So it's already a little bit weird. Like you click up here on Publish, you hit this page, you have to select a file. If we were uploading an individual file, we'd go through this flow. But I'm going to skip that and go over here to Go Live. So click Go Live once, then pick some settings, like round 1 of settings, and then click Go Live again. And we're still not live. There's this error that doesn't extremely make sense. There's the opportunity to fill in a bunch of stuff. Here it'll give you a stream key. Another bold decision that they made is that this seems to be randomly generated every time you start a stream, which means that you're never going to be able to just click go in OBS and have a stream unless you have this permanent live option ticked, but then it disables replays. So it seems like another kind of weird compromise, but yeah, we can live with it. It just means we have to paste this into OBS every time we stream. So I've got OBS mostly set up here to stream 720p video. We can copy this to the clipboard, go in here, paste it. And I just have this streaming 720p because this computer is going to be really CPU constrained because I'm doing all of this on one computer right now, and it's not a particularly fast one. But we could stream some isopods maybe. Start streaming. So as soon as I click start streaming now, these settings no longer work. Like, let's say I wanted to go back here and change the title to my cool isopods. I don't think that's going to work now. Yeah, sorry, something went wrong. Cannot update a live that has already started. But now if I go to just the plain old videos here, we have my cool isopods. I think if we, yeah, the main server pages here, like the recently added videos, do show the live stream. They don't seem to show thumbnails until after the stream is done, so that we get this like octopus with a gamer headset on. And then the other thing that's weird about this is while it's live streaming, they've disabled the controls entirely, which is weird. Like, I think you have to go out of your way to do this. So like you can't seek and you can't really tell what the latency is on the live stream. So as far as I can tell, the latency seems to be variable and it seems to be able to get pretty high. Some of that might be because I was running out of CPU earlier, but I think even if I don't quite run out of CPU, the latency can grow pretty high in this setup. So, you know, I don't know if it's totally ready to use as a main way of doing streams, but it certainly might be a thing I can add in addition to the live.diode.zone thing that I've got running in the background. Not the isopod stream. You could play the isopod stream if you want, but yeah, so this is another non-YouTube or Twitch stream that I've got, which is just a pretty basic kind of DIY setup with Nginx and just a little bit of HTML and JavaScript. It's going to get a little confusing if we want to actually measure these, but the I think this is going to be a good bit lower latency than this at this point. You can kind of see how far behind we are. It's not too bad at the moment. But there's no seeking back or forward, which is weird because it is actually recording the entire stream into a format that should be seekable on the server. So we can look at what it's doing on the server side. Let's see. Yeah, so here's the server logs. It doesn't actually log every video segment get, so the logs are a little sparse here, but oh, actually it does log all the live segments. Gosh. That's something else that's weird about this. So I was digging into this to see like what the architecture is, like which live kind of server architecture they're using. I figured they would use Nginx RTMP server since that's pretty easy to use and easy to install and fast. And they're using somebody's media stack totally written in Node.js. So they've got like JavaScript code doing the remuxing and JavaScript code doing the RTMP implementation. So it, like, I would expect it to be fairly heavy and also like relatively new code that maybe doesn't have as much like cross-client testing put into it. So I'm a little concerned that their test suite seems to basically only use FFmpeg, but at least OBS works. I mean, OBS is probably also using FFmpeg to send the RTMP at this point. So yeah, it does dump these into the same streaming playlists / HLS directory that we're using for just regular HLS video on PeerTube. But if you look at one of these regular HLS videos, like I'll look at one of the older ones here. This is the format PeerTube usually stores videos in when you're in HLS mode. So not the WebTorrent mode, but the HLS mode. You can configure it on a server-by-server basis, whether you have one or the other or both. But normally with the HLS mode, you get all these M3U8 playlists for each resolution. Those playlists are actually, they look like regular HLS playlists in that they have one entry per video segment in them. Not the 0, because that's like a meta playlist with all the others, but most of these have individual segments, but the segments here are actually byte ranges within a single large file. And then within that file, these are not quite normal MP4 files. They're actually formatted so that there's effectively a small MP4 header at the very beginning, and then each segment is a complete MP4 that can be parsed and loaded separately. So it's a little bit of a complicated format to box up, but it's convenient in that you can record incrementally, but you can also just use these as entire files. Like you can just download this whole file and give it to a media player that works with MP4 files for the most part. Some media players that work with non-fragmented MP4s don't work with fragmented MP4s, so the compatibility isn't perfect, but it seemed like a decent compatibility trade-off for them to make. So then if you look at this new stream, this is a completely different format. I mean, it's still HLS, but now we're using MPEG transport stream, which is actually a much more common format. I wouldn't be surprised if they're using this just because the RTMP library they picked only supports this format, because it's much more common for this format to be implemented. But this is much more like vanilla HLS, where you have separate MPEG transport streams. This format is simpler, but it's less efficient. It duplicates the audio track between different video resolutions under all circumstances. Like there's no way around it with this format. They're doing that with the other format too, though. There's so many different ways to make the video slightly more complicated or significantly more complicated in order to reduce the bandwidth usage a little bit. But MPEG transport stream is kind of especially bad just because there's a lot of overhead, like in the way that these packet streams are encoded. It uses very tiny packets, and so the header size is kind of a large proportion of the video. But anyway, then it looks like what happens when you end the live stream. So if I wanted to end the live stream, I could just stop OBS over here. Last time I tried this earlier today, it looked like it was kind of inconclusive, like when the server actually determined that the live stream was over. At some point the player stops, and then at some point the server remuxes these files into the fragmented MP4s that it usually expects. And then after that point it plays like any normal HLS PeerTube video, and you can seek and everything. So that's interesting. I just noticed, so earlier there was no seek bar, now there's a seek bar. And then it says this life has ended, or this live has ended. And it just stops. And it doesn't actually play all the way to the end, or did it? I think it did play to the end of the video, but the progress bar is wrong. So it looks like that's actually the end of the video, but it didn't quite come to the edge. So anyway. And I guess at this point I can't seek at all because it's probably already remuxing these files. No? Maybe I just can't seek for unrelated reasons. If I reload it, it just says this live has ended. So I think there is like a gap where the video is kind of broken for a minute between when the live stream ends and when it actually transcode, or it's not actually transcoding, it's just remuxing the files, but it's still going to take its time doing that. YouTube used to have this problem, but they fixed it some time ago. Anyway, that's basically my experience so far trying out this PeerTube 3 release candidate. It's generally something where like I'm excited that it exists, and I kind of wish it was a little bit better, but I don't know if I'm actually going to make it better myself, or if I'd rather work on something slightly different at this point. But both seem like good options. If you don't mind hacking on like large piles of Angular code and multimedia frameworks written in JavaScript, then maybe it's your bag, and I'm sure they could use some contributions. Also, if you like hosting little video communities, totally try just running a PeerTube server. It might be your thing. It's not that hard to set up. There are some, you can get really into it with trying to optimize it or support large configurations, but you could also just run it out of a Docker image. So I guess that was the main thing I wanted to start with here, was just kind of show some of the stuff I've been messing with from like a sysadmin's perspective. The lower level code that I've been doing the last couple streams is kind of on that track of, well, I don't know if I want to be the one to hack on this particular code base. Maybe I can make something else. So I've been kind of hacking on something that I want to turn into my own media server, but clearly the thing that exists is more practical than the pie in the sky project that some software engineer wants to write. So like, I'm glad this exists. I won't try to pretend that my thing that doesn't exist is actually better than the thing that exists, but sometimes it would be nice to work on something that actually has a video architecture that has some more planning behind it.
It's a little bit of like cathedral versus bazaar.
Kinda, yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly not interested in building. I don't know. It's a really weird analogy because, like, in some ways, the something like PeerTube is like the bazaar. Like, it's this very accessible thing that is, written in a language that most people that program can hack on, and it doesn't really use any specialized components. It's written in fairly normal web technologies, so that's all very egalitarian. But then it also, I don't know. It feels like in other ways, like it is kind of hard to get into, and it doesn't like reuse sort of obvious video technologies that exist, and it also doesn't like add something that feels like it was designed very well. I don't know. I'm probably too harsh on it, but I just have had like I feel like it wouldn't be too hard to do better with the video side of things.
I wonder
Yeah.
how much adoption the streaming feature is going to get.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too, because I also wonder like how much extra CPU and bandwidth and storage people tend to have when they run PeerTube. Like, how close to capacity are people running? Like, are they going to want to add a new feature that is going to dramatically increase the CPU load? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that goes, because like maybe if I'm interested in making a like a live streaming thing that has features that are interesting to me, like the videos are all like transcoded and ready to go immediately, and there's good caching, and you can sort of forget about transcode versions that you can recreate easily, and you can easily like share the load of serving these files. Like, those are features that are interesting to me, but if it just turns out that people running decentralized video sites aren't that interested in live streaming, then that's an interesting thing to know. I don't know if any of this like advertising copy is written for 3.0 yet. I think a lot of this is still referring to the previous release. There's a roadmap. Maybe they have like a checklist here of what's... And they had a crowdfund for this phase of development. Global search, moderation, plugins and playlists, and live streaming. So they're like on schedule for this. This like just went in the repo, and it is approximately November. Cool. Yeah, I mean they're also doing a pretty good job at like setting expectations and hitting a schedule. Like, it seems like they've been really keeping that in mind, which is cool. Oh, interesting. We got one comment from Adam who ran PeerTube for a few years ago, and then they stopped touching it due to a lack of live streaming. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see who else is in that position, like who might have kind of left it alone, but might come back because of live. Looks like there are already a handful of public servers running this release candidate. Like, a lot. Here's one that even has like a .stream domain. Continuous. It's like a music live stream. So same thing where the progress bar doesn't actually do anything useful yet. I wonder how they added that box to the top. Mainly for live streams. Ooh, with 40 gigs of disk. What is this instance type?
How much disk do you have?
Hmm?
How much disk do you have?
Like 16 terabytes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 4 gigs of RAM, 8 euros a month. Is that right? CX21? Oh, CX21, not CPX. Gosh, these are like chip part numbers. Okay. 2 vCPU, 20 terabyte traffic. Interesting. Yeah, I'd be really curious to see how well this works out for all the various PeerTube admins out there. Has this reappeared yet? Oh. No process there. Oh, so where did my file go? Did I not ask for it to archive this stream? I might have forgotten to click that tick box. So it just took a while to delete it, and then it deleted it. That's also not great. Gosh, so I've got to click go live again. Yeah, if I were to just hit start streaming without putting in the new key, it goes into a disconnect retry loop. So can we do a really short one here? Oh, you know, I still forgot to hit the checkbox. Gosh, that is a really confusing UI flow, at least to me. Okay, so the way you actually have to do this is go live. Before you connect the client, you have to go over here and tick that. Okay. And hit update. Oh, and when you hit update, that goes away, and then you have to come back here and hit that to get the live stream key. It's not started yet. I wonder if I have to reload to get it to see that the stream has started. I kind of expect so at this point. Looks like that reload was necessary. Oh yeah, that's a good question. Adler's wondering what the best place is to interact with folks and with me while streaming. Yeah, for a while I was running my own like kind of chat hangout place, and I stopped that recently just because it didn't seem like I didn't really like any of the platforms, so I was kind of running out of steam for running my own thing. So now I've mostly just been trying to pay attention to both the YouTube and the Twitch chats, but I don't have a separate chat. But yeah, there's a lot of social pressure to just set up Discord because everyone seems to like that. I've been dragging my feet because I just don't like Discord because I'm an old person.
I forget how you feel about element or matrix.
Oh yeah, I've been wanting to set up my own matrix thing. Like I've used it for some other communities and it seems pretty cool.
It seems like usually Twitch is more active, like there's more people and more comments.
Yeah, today it's been kind of quiet on Twitch, but it does seem like that's often the case. Okay, so I did a short live stream. I've got my MPEG TS files here. At some point, I assume they're going to be remixed, but now the video is back in that twilight zone where it's not actually in the list anymore. And I have to wonder, did I click the checkbox? Is it going to delete the video or save it? I don't have anything like big updates on the other project, the sandbox, since the last stream. On the last stream, we did a bunch of like debugging and memory mapping stuff, and I'm basically ready to implement a file table. I just have to kind of stick that in. Oh, we've got another vote for Discord. Why do people like Discord? I'm just such a curmudgeon. Like I don't want platforms that have like gamer features. Like something text only would be cool, but you know, there's probably some way to bridge Matrix in Discord. I could also just like, I don't know, I could use Discord and just, because I'm used to hating computers, like it wouldn't be any worse to hate computers like slightly more than I already do, right? Yeah, I don't know if I want to wait for this to do anything. I have no idea what this is waiting for. Like, it seems like it should just be doing this already. Like, we're not taking any CPU. Is there anything interesting in the log? It probably just has a timer where every so often it looks at videos that might need archiving and archives them. Well, yeah, so there's PeerTube. I don't know if there's much else to say about that. We also wanted to talk about some just like other decentralized technology, because I mean, video is a thing like that a lot of people want, including me, but it's also not always the best medium. Like, it feels like having a decentralized experience that's actually multimedia would be nice, where you can actually make multiple kinds of posts. And so actually we were looking down that, you know, just like trying to see what video or what other models are there for just creating decentralized communities. And there's actually one that's existed for a while that, you know, I hadn't looked at until recently, and we hadn't looked at until recently, Secure Scuttlebutt. And few people mentioned it on the first one of these, kind of escaping from decentralized tech, or from centralized tech into decentralized tech streams. A few people mentioned Scuttlebutt. And I think we'd both tried it really briefly, but couldn't get it to connect, and I didn't really know how to debug it. So we took a slightly closer look at it, and we were trying it out both with this desktop client called Patchwork, and also this mobile client, Manyverse. Let's fire up Patchwork. Oh, was that a log? Oh yeah, I think this did finally do the video conversion. Yeah, there it is. So that's probably back. Live just now. And I think at this point I can rename it, hopefully.
So we're looking at the dev version of Diode Zone? Not the
Yeah, I mean, it's
production
not even a version of Diode Zone. It's just another PeerTube server that I set up on the same source code base.
line? Okay.
But yeah, the databases are completely separate.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and these transcodes were done in real time while we were streaming live. It didn't have to redo those later, it just remuxed them, so that's kind of nice. And then this seems to mostly work at this point, the same as I would expect any other HLS video to work. There's still this bug where... Oh, did they fix this? That might be new. I tried this just earlier today, and this download window was blank, and it wasn't displaying anything correctly, but I don't know if that was an issue that was per video, or maybe the client JavaScript just hadn't updated. Let's see what it's like when I try this. Oh yeah. That's probably a problem with the conversion, like a problem with the database. Like at some point when I updated PeerTube or turned off WebTorrent support or whatever, it left the database in a state where it doesn't know what the individual file names are. But this is a file I uploaded on 3.0.orc1. It seems to work fine. So it's just a problem with the old database entries at this point. That's annoying. I'll have to write some kind of converter tool. So then I should be able to download these. Let's just make sure that works. Yeah. mPlayer. Yeah, undefined classic JavaScript, right? Yeah, I don't know. I could be less of an old person and use Discord, but like I don't know what there is to like about it other than I can talk to a bunch of gamers on it, and that isn't really a positive for me. Like it's visually busy. It's not something that I have any sort of like community stake in or, interest in supporting. It's just somebody else's tech monopoly trying to take over the world. It's small, but like they're just trying to grow without bound like every other tech company that's trying to eat their field. These are some like broken live streams that did not actually publish from before. Anyway, let's look at Scuttlebutt a little bit. They've got a cute website with these cute little critters. I guess I can reclaim this screen space since Tuco's not around. They've got a bunch of videos on here. Yeah, so the main thing about Scuttlebutt is it's kind of based on these databases that you share with each other sort of asynchronously. So you write a bunch of posts, and then at some point your client figures out how to get those posts elsewhere, and they kind of gossip across the network.
Apparently that's what scuttlebutt means. It's not a word I was familiar with before.
It's so timely. It's modeled on the way epidemics spread. Great. Rumor mongering protocols. That's basically what's going on with Scuttlebutt, as far as I can tell. They just kind of disseminate information across this network of nodes that are connected. But for the most part, most of the nodes don't know what to do with the information because it's encrypted using keys that you don't necessarily have. But you can have public info that's encrypted using well-known keys, or maybe unencrypted. I forget how that works. And then you can have private communications between two users who found each other via this sort of bigger overlay network. It is a bit more like BBSs or something. I mean, it's all like back in the BBS days. I mean, folks didn't encrypt things because it was all just sparsely populated enough that the trolls weren't as big of a deal. But yeah, like nowadays, folks want to reclaim that kind of BBS feel, but you still have to encrypt it because the internet's a much bigger place.
So someone mentioned this on the stream a couple weeks ago, but we actually maybe 4 months ago heard about it on a decentralized web meetup. And so I think we tried like for 10 minutes or half an hour to get it working using the Manyverse app. Couldn't get it working, gave up. And so more recently we tried harder, mostly Micah tried harder to get it working, which included using different kinds of apps and CLI tools.
Yeah. So I think part of what we were running into was that it's one of those things where like peer-to-peer networks often have many different ways that you can connect, and you expect that one of them will work. But if none of them works, now each of those is a potential thing that you could debug. So like, I think some of the ways that the Manyverse app could connect to other Manyverse apps, like on mobile, it could connect over Bluetooth, but that wouldn't work because like one of us was on iOS and one of us was on Android, and they don't have Bluetooth support across OSs. We could have connected via Wi-Fi, but we weren't on the same Wi-Fi segment because I have my network segmented into all these paranoid little shards that can't talk to each other. And we could have communicated with each other through like an internet-based pub server, but we weren't on a pub at the time that we tried last. So the thing that we did recently was we tried some pub servers. We tried a public pub server that's this gossip.noisebridge.info. And I also set up a little pub server on this little embedded machine ShopCube, which is this icon you see.
Do you want to maybe show the app page on the Scuttlebutt website?
Oh, yeah.
It lists kind of the various clients before we look at this one. Hit start.
Start. Oh, yeah. This text is very big. I don't know if it needs to be so big. So yeah, this is pretty cool. There's a patchwork, patch bay. As far as I can tell, all the apps for this are basically like Electron apps or browser-based in some way, because that's what their toolchain is built on. And so I haven't tried Patchfox. I've only briefly looked at Patch Bay. It does seem to be much more complicated than Patchwork. And then Patchwork seems like it's trying to be pretty straightforward, but it is still a little bit weird at first. And then Manyverse seems to be very similar in the overall UI paradigm to Patchwork, but like missing a bunch of things. But that's my like 10-minute impression. Like we still need to like get deeper into trying each of these apps really.
Yeah, I mean, I think Patchwork is basically where most people should start if you have a desktop. That's the big window you see here. Manyverse, it seems to be a bit more beta quality right now and to not have as many features. It's nice that it runs on a phone, but it's worth mentioning, maybe someone here knows more about this, but from what I'm reading, there isn't really a way to merge your identities across devices. So you don't log in, you don't really have an identity, it's just your device has an identity. So if you're using Patchwork on your desktop and then you're using Manyverse or something on your phone, like it's basically two different accounts.
Yeah,
and that seems that's a kind of a weird limitation for a network to have, or system to have.
So it looks like if you're running like multiple types of like multiple clients on the same like machine on the same user account, they will share data just because they're using the same library code. So if you're running like Patchwork and Patchbay and the command line client, they all seem to use this same like tilde.ssb directory. But like, I mean, that clearly doesn't help you on a phone. Like there might be some way to import and export keys. I don't know if there's an easy way to do that, or if there's a problem with like the database is staying consistent on like two machines that can write to it.
I was skimming a post a little before the stream. I found that was describing a way to share identities between devices. And maybe it was basically saying it's easy, but don't screw it up. Like something about you can't run both machines at once, and something about like if you screw it up, all your messages might be lost. So it just
yeah.
I don't want to say it's a bad idea until I read the article in full, but basically it doesn't seem like it's well supported to have a single identity on Scuttlebutt right now.
Definitely the thing that seemed easiest to do when I was just setting this up was to have a separate identity for the different computers and like have them all follow each other. And that seems to work okay, but it's confusing.
Yeah, I mean, you know what it kind of reminds me of is like I was thinking about it and I was like, well, like the accounts I've set up so far are just kind of test accounts, but if I was going to use it more seriously, it'd probably be like, well, okay, this is like Z's phone, this is Z's laptop, but now you're sort of leaking what device you're posting from every time you post.
Yeah, that's not great either.
But what does that remind you of? It like when someone posts something on Twitter that it says at the bottom posted from like the Twitter for Android client.
Gosh, yeah. And then there's like the 1% of weird people who are using their own thing to post. It's actually kind of relevant to that when you start up the other client that the other like desktop client they recommended, PatchBay. First thing it asked you is what identity you want to launch with, and I think SSB here. I mean, it's secure Scuttlebutt, but I think that might also refer to that like default .ssb directory that we were just looking at. There's like a place to insert custom JSON. That's cool. I'm also not totally sure like what's different about initial sync. Like it says click this like when you're setting up your account for the first time, but I'm not quite sure what that actually changes. Then so it looks like we're starting out just getting like everything that qualifies as a post that we can see on the network, just like anything that's like within some number of hops, I guess.
Yeah, and you didn't subscribe to the BBC, did you?
The only thing I did on this machine is I followed my other desktop computer, which also follows some of the other test accounts we set up.
Yeah, so I feel guilty because I subscribed to the BBC. That's I think is a bot reposted in the RSS feed, and so maybe you're just getting that because it's in my network.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we could. I still don't know how to use this app. I think if we go to notifications, we see. Yeah, so I don't know how to get all that information here. But if I go back to Patchwork, there was a section where it's like here's the like follow relationships that we just saw get established. So there's this, and so I think because we got a message from this account showing these follows, that now we know about these, but I don't know. Like, I don't think we're following them. I just think that they show up in the public network because we know about them. But I don't know if that's accurate.
I'm overall like impressed and not impressed so far. Like once I started to see NoiseBridge content, and some of it's recent, some of it's from days old, like the past week.
Oh yeah, let's see if we can follow this. So like I know about this server because I've seen my friends connect to it, but like I'm not actually following it. I could choose. So I guess I saw this. Like I saw that this server followed back a bunch of users, including this one that I know about. So I could follow.
So I think if I understand it, you can follow it, but the essence of an invite is that it makes the server follow you. So I think you still want to invite.
That makes sense. So it looks like now it's loading more of these icons. That's interesting. It wasn't loading any of the icons before. Looks like it's still kind of streaming in some additional data too. Yeah, so we get a list of all the people who've been invited to the pub.
Has anyone on the stream already used Scuttlebutt? Or tried and gave up?
Lots of channels.
Wait, so, huh? Did I miss it and you already got an invite, or you
No,
just,
I
there's
didn't.
just
I
showed
didn't
up?
invite. I just followed. I followed the. Well, it's not in who to follow anymore because I already followed them. So where is it now? It's. I was expecting it to show up in connections. I don't even know where the NoiseBridge hub is in this UI now.
I don't think it's following you yet, or I would see it on my screen.
Yeah, we could try the invite process.
So, yeah, if you go there on the official website and then look for, yeah, okay, you found it.
Yeah, it's this code right there.
Do you want to slow down for seconds so people know what's going on?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So we found this page. There's another like GitHub page which lists, like on the Scuttlebutt project, which lists all the public pub servers.
I mean, backing up even slightly more, NoiseBridge is a hackerspace in San Francisco.
Yeah. So they listed something about NoiseBridge. I think it said that the NoiseBridge one was private, but if you click through, like, they just have a public invite right there.
Well, it says as of this March, it's public and open with limited invites available, but I don't understand if this is like an invite vending machine or if they just like edit the wiki every so often.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
So I'm going to try
used
this.
that and my friend used it earlier today, so I think you can use it multiple times.
So if I hit join server, invite code, redeem. So that seemed to work, yeah. So when I tried, so I still totally don't really understand the invite code system. I tried generating invite codes on the command line a couple of times, but I think it might just be a combination of bad documentation and a really old version of Node causing things to break in ways that I don't understand yet. And so I was getting some invite codes that probably weren't actually valid from that process.
Okay.
Platypus suggests just setting up IRC. I mean, I have an IRC server actually. It's just kind of annoying to use because nobody's on IRC all the time anymore like we used to be.
So I saw you join the NoiseBridge server on my screen.
Oh, nice. I see an
and then
update
I just tried
here.
to send you a private message.
Cool. I haven't seen it yet, but maybe it'll show up in a minute. I might have to follow you to get the private message. I don't know. So
Is
like
it-
I can see you right now, but I am
Well,
already
it's-
following you.
It's so Zion is my phone.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm not, so because there's no shit, no.
Right. So like what?
We'll go to the private tab.
Yeah. There's a mention.
Oh no, the private tab.
This what? Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So I don't see it there. Oh,
There's
wait.
a mention here. These are follows. I could try reloading the whole app. I can reload this page. I guess that reloaded the app. I can try just like reopening the app to see if it re-downloads data.
Well, actually, try going to the NoiseBridge timeline. Okay, you see the thinking emoji username.
Yeah.
Follow that person. And now see if the private message showed up. Oh, maybe
I
not.
never know how immediate to expect anything to be with this program. Like, I kind of expect the protocol to be asynchronous, but it bothers me that the UI doesn't tell me how asynchronous every particular thing is going to be.
Yeah. Like, so far I find this kind of really janky, but I kind of just love it.
It does kind of have that like BBS feel of being janky and charming at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact that they call it a gossip protocol kind of sets the expectation that it's like, gossip is a little asynchronous, and it, maybe isn't always fully accurate. Like,
That's interesting. So I can see your
try
public
sending
posts here
another
now,
one.
but I could try sending you a message. Send private message. Okay, I published a private message to you.
Is Fish Orb your
Yeah, the fish bee owl.
Yeah, I see the same hash. So we recently set up IRC here, partly for like internal fast messaging. And for a minute I was thinking, well, maybe this could replace IRC, but I don't think it's fast enough.
Well, it might. So, I mean, I feel like part of the problem that we're having with performance is just that a lot of these devices don't have direct connections to each other, and gossip protocols are by their nature kind of slow. So, I mean, I think if we were on the same local network segment, maybe, but, well, so we could try that, actually. We could try 2 desktop machines on the same local network segment and try just, like, see if we can have an interactive chat between them.
Yeah.
I wanted to respond to these points from Commodore in Twitch chat, who says they're wondering how PeerTube can work if nobody uses it, and if you need seeders with good internet and efficient patented codecs to make the most of consumer seeding internet. And it sounds like it's shifting the dependency from YouTube, and it shifts the dependency onto ISPs and software patents. So it is worth thinking about software patents. I don't know if we're quite in a place where that's like the high order bit of any of these problems. Like, you can be extremely persnickety about the particular levels of openness of the codecs you use, but like in practice, H.264 basically works for people, and if it starts having patents enforced in a way that actually starts being a pain, it wouldn't be that big of a deal to switch to different codecs. So, like, it's not that there aren't other codecs right now, it's that people haven't had the proper carrots and sticks to switch to completely patent unencumbered codecs. So I don't know that that's really a real problem. That feels like a straw man to me. But it's definitely worth thinking about just like how resource intensive and bandwidth intensive video is. Like, decentralizing video does not make it more efficient. So, like, we're still using a lot of energy and using a lot of storage just sending these videos to each other. So that's certainly worth keeping in mind. But I think there's also just a lot of unused bandwidth and unused storage on all of our, like, not all of our, but like many of us have residential internet connections with lots of extra capacity, especially in like cities with fiber, which is increasingly common. So I think increasingly it's not so much an issue of just raw storage space or just raw video compression ability, but the necessity to have tools that make it easy to manage these resources we already have and to use them together. So I do think the problem is to some extent a software problem. It's definitely also a political problem and also a resource problem, but it does seem like there's part of this which is just we can't use the resources we already have access to effectively because the software hasn't been like invested in the right ways.
So they're also saying most of the people interested in decentralized video sharing are of the Bernie Sanders kind of mindset, not very diverse. I take issue with that a little bit because if me and Micah complain about this a lot, it's there are a fair amount of kind of left-wing Bernie type people, but there's also a fair amount of like kind of crypto people and like libertarians.
A lot of libertarians, a lot of free speech enthusiasts, a lot of right-wing people.
It's almost just like anyone who's not super mainstream, and there's a lot of ways to not be that.
I mean, it honestly, that aspect of it does kind of remind me of the older internet because, the older internet definitely skewed way more toward like affluent white people and people who had families who were in industries that were early in computing, like, defense and finance and whatever. So there's all that corruption. But like, there's that side of it where the earlier internet had a larger proportion of people who were just overall kind of dissatisfied with things and were looking for a new place to hang out. And that part of the decentralized internet is really interesting to me. The like kind of more punk side of it. I wonder if we could try sending a message between the 2 desktop clients. The other one isn't on screen on this screen right now, but I think you might be able to access it. I'm just trying to send myself a private message from this other computer. Let's see if that showed up. I think those computers are on the same Ethernet segment, so they should be able to reach each other via UDP broadcast. So I don't see it right away. It's possible I just messed something up. That is just something that seems to be a general issue with peer-to-peer protocols, though, is like when something inevitably breaks, it's especially annoying to debug. And that seems like it's going to need fixing.
So one of the things I'm always thinking whenever we look at these protocols is this set of tools so great we can just use it? Or is it hopelessly busted, we should just not use it? Or is it promising, you know? Like the underlying protocol is good, but maybe the clients aren't good, and maybe we could build a better client or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm mostly really like this. I'm actually kind of alarmed by the idea that you can't have a single identity. Like your identity is basically your computer.
Hmm.
I don't know if alarm's the right word, but it's definitely different from what we're used to.
Yeah. So it looks like I got the messages from your account, Z, but I didn't get the message that I just tried sending myself from my desktop computer. So maybe they're just
9
trickling
minutes ago.
back. Yeah. Maybe it just takes a indeterminate amount of time to actually make the connection.
The other thing I was reading, I'm not positive this is true, but from what I understand, I think you need the whole, or at least like a large percentage of the distributed database to be able to use this. And so on your phone, you might need gigabytes of the Scuttlebutt database just to use any of it. And
oh, yeah. It's like you have to download everyone's cat photos before you can download the instant message from your friend.
Yeah. So it's a little bit like Bitcoin maybe in that way.
It is an append-only ledger. Gosh, yeah, folks, I mean, there's some data structures that are definitely worth getting excited about, but it's also worth keeping in mind their limitations.
I still haven't gotten your message.
Oh, the extreme secret?
Yeah.
Huh. Does it say if we are friends? We are friends.
So one thing I do like about this app is, for better or for worse, there's a like button. So I feel like if you're trying to drive adoption of some new tool, like I just went to a bunch of the hashtags on the Noise Bridge thing, and I just liked everybody's posts, you know. So if they're like, oh, I posted on the Elixir channel or the New People channel and no one responded, like at least someone liked your post, So that's the service I'm providing to the community right now. Also, it's hard to know how private or public these things are. Like if someone posts, like if someone posts on the Noise Bridge RSS channel or the music channel, is that like a private Facebook group, or is it more like a public forum that you just had to take a few steps to get to?
Right. Like, is this somebody's like dinner conversation, or are they like shouting at each other outside?
Yeah.
Oh, is this the Erlang runtime?
Like if someone posts in a public forum and you screenshot it and then make fun of them on Twitter, it might be rude, but I don't know if it's unethical. But if they do it in a private forum, it's more unethical,
Yeah. This is interesting. I feel like I should take another look at Patch Bay now that there's more stuff loaded. That's a really good point. Zarthra says that they feel like for tech solutions to be mature enough to be really stable and largely used, it depends on either big corporations or a very large community maintaining it. Yeah, that does seem
Yeah.
to be one of the fundamental problems here. And like, it's kind of incumbent upon us to find ways to work together and subdivide the problem and like build on each other's work. But goodness knows that's hard to do. I don't even know where these posts are coming from. This is like everything I can see on via Noisebridge's hub, I guess.
Yeah, I think I started seeing that person's post when I joined the noise bridge.
We're probably just downloading everything on Noisebridge's hard drive at this point. How big is the database, I wonder? 600 megs already.
Commodore, did you ever hear about El Paquete? I think it's called. It was
From Cuba?
Yeah. So my understanding is that when it was harder to get internet in Cuba, people would just buy like a thumb drive of the latest cool stuff every week or so.
It definitely has tabs. And it's got all these things over here. Like, what is the dark crystal? Are these like mini games?
Isn't that a Jim Henson?
It was. And what is scrying? Is this a location-based thing?
Wait, there's a Scuttle hangout in the East Bay?
I guess so.
Oh, we missed it. It was 20 months ago.
This was a long time ago. Gosh.
That's how long it takes to get a message.
It is basically the message in a bottle at this point.
We should make a protocol called Message in a Bottle. It works like anywhere from a year to 10 years.
Ooh, this box. I would expect this from GTK, but not from an Electron app.
So one time.
Wow.
I don't want to go on a rant.
But it's a podcast. Podcasts are for rants. You don't have to rant, but you're allowed to rant.
The rant is when people reduce design to like fonts and colors, which is omitting the fact that white space is extremely important. And that was an extreme example you just showed.
Yes. A lot of open source programmers, myself included, have made grave mistakes with white space.
It's like, what's wrong? I mean, you can read it.
Right? Yeah, you'd be horrified at some of the UIs I made in my past. These don't have icons.
No, I feel like I've liked everything you've showed me, at least the ones I've seen.
Cool. I've got some really horrifying stuff I did in the early 2000s. Oh, I can make peer invites from here. Don't really want to invite everyone on the stream archive, but... I don't know how to find that Noisebridge hub, or...
So Platypus with Cheese is summing up the situation. Why is this overly idealistic, decentralized solution such a hassle to use?
Right?
You're not wrong. I mean, what I would say is that these are like pretty cutting edge problems and solutions, you know, and so don't despise the day of small beginnings. But also, I think as these tools get more attention, like you know, like people have to be real and say like, well, right now it's not really fit. Like I'm trying to figure out like which of these tools are useful to give to more technical or less technical people. So like Beaker Browser, for example, seemed relatively polished. Like it didn't feel like a hall of mirrors trying to use it. Getting things to replicate across the internet or a network maybe is challenging, but like there's probably certain use cases for it that are pretty straightforward. So I would love to mess with Beaker Browser more, like publish a website there and then say like, here are the steps you go through to access it. And people are like, oh, it's a browser. I know what browsers are. Scuttlebutt so far seems a bit more challenging. So I think if you're pretty nerdy, go for it. If you're expecting it to be like Facebook and real smooth, it's not really there yet.
Yeah, I'd love to try experimenting some more with Beaker Browser, definitely. It seems like we were just hitting some of the same connectivity problems with not being able to reach each other on the network, but if I set up like a network, like an internet reachable server of whatever, like I don't know what that looks like with Beaker, but I think there's just like a hyperswarm daemon you can run or something like that to rehost your Beaker files.
Zartharis is saying, I think no matter how interesting and well-made a piece of tech is, if there isn't a whole team of UX people thinking about how to make it very easy to use, it won't really fly. I basically agree with that, and that's a big part of why we're doing these streams is like, I want us to talk about not just, oh, this protocol is interesting, but like talk about the user experience and try to bring in more like designers and front-end people to figure exactly that problem out. So, you know, if I was in love with Scuttlebutt, I could spend my weekends trying to, you know, make a new client or make the existing client better. I sort of hate that it's an Electron, but the plus side of that is it's using technologies that are pretty accessible for me to hack on. You know, I time is limited, so I don't know if I'm going to choose to do that with Scuttlebutt specifically, but I think you're right. Have people seen there was a recent project that was released called I think it's just open source design. So I feel like there's this like long-standing problem, which is tangential to what this person is saying, which is that engineers understand the sort of the political economy of software and have incentives to care about free software and open source software and, you know, Libre software. And designers mostly are kind of like, yeah, I don't get it. Like they want to create a cool experience and they want to get paid most of the time. And so, yeah, I think that's the one. Yeah. Ironically or non-ironically, the site is not especially attractive, but it is usable, which is fine because UX is more important than visual design. So, but anyways, yeah. So this site and maybe related projects are, I think, trying to recruit more designers to help out with open source software. So maybe we'll see a Scuttlebutt posting on there one day.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'd be curious to know more about like what the real roadblocks are preventing like, more open source folks and designers from collaborating. Like it seems like part of it is definitely that folks don't know like why open source is good. It also seems like a lot of the open source developers just have no idea like why someone would want to think about users because they are used to thinking about machines. But then also just there are a lot of like just technical barriers, you know, programs that are written with like desktop UI toolkits or specific like native platform constraints are often like less straightforward to design than stuff that's using like web toolkits that people are used to.
Yeah, I mean it's a big can of worms. I mean, I feel like the basic, like one of the issues is for most designers, open source software is not solving a problem that they have. But maybe that will change with more awareness or more education or something. Open source software engineers are not fun people to work with, maybe especially for designers. They routinely say things like the UI doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I'm still excited about that website you just looked at, because it represents a kind of coming together of those communities.
Yeah. Nextcloud seems to have relatively good design for an open source program. It's cool. Somebody mentioned that on one of the surveys recently, and I was just gonna throw out there that like I've been pretty happy with Nextcloud. There's certainly areas where it's kind of resource hungry, or image thumbnailing takes forever or whatever, but like it meets a pretty good baseline level of service, and even sometimes it surprises me with what it can do, and there are tons of plugins and stuff for it. So I've been basically using that as like a local alternative to Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever, and storing all of my like work files on it pretty much. And it's like, unlike a cloud service where you would have like a single account a lot of the time, it's very easy to just make sub accounts and use them for whatever. So like I can have a separate account for each computer or a separate account for each project and share them with each other as much as I want. That's the kind of feature that places like Dropbox will charge you for.
You want to plug the survey again, since you mentioned it?
Oh yeah, the survey. Yeah, so we brought this up on the last stream, but if you look at it again, there's actually a couple new questions that we'll get to. So Z put together this great website, defangme.com. If you go there, it's just kind of like a manifesto and a survey and some resources at this point. So it has a bunch of links to information about why you might care about reducing your dependency on big tech, all the various things that they're currently fucking up at large scales right now. And then there's a way for you to get in touch with us and just give us a little bit of like feedback on these streams. I know we don't have like a regular schedule. We're just kind of throwing these streams out into the ether and talking to a few people live, but a lot more people probably see these in the archives and might want to send us their 2 cents. And so I'd really appreciate if you do have thoughts on this either now or later. If you go over to defangme.com, there's a few different sections on this that you could fill out if you want to. So it's all optional, but this first one is basically what we were asking before. And then we've got some new sections for email and Scuttlebutt.
Yeah, so the first survey is kind of general. The second one is about email, because we talked about email for a stream or two ago. So if you're on Gmail or Outlook or something and you're trying to get off, we're curious what's working for you or what's not working for you. But the third one is about Scuttlebutt. So I haven't seen anyone in the stream talk about Scuttlebutt yet, except for maybe a couple streams ago, and then on those other meetups. But like for all we know, there's for every 2 people that use Scuttlebutt, there's 20 people that tried to use it and got confused. So even if you don't use it, go ahead and fill out the survey if you're interested, and that helps us understand, how much interest there is and what problems people are having with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really appreciate all the input that you've sent us so far, and any that you want to send us in the future or the present. Another couple of good comments. Zarthra says that they like how in the past 5 years, JavaScript has kind of blurred the line between programming and designing a bit. It's definitely made programming a lot more approachable, and it's made it, I think you see a lot more people with overlapping skill sets who do a lot of programming and design. It definitely seems like a place that's been growing.
So one of the recent survey responses to the general one, it was a German user who had a lot of really good feedback. I'm going to paraphrase a bit and then quote them for a bit. They were talking a fair amount about how they just feel like people are getting more and more deadened to constant surveillance and lack of privacy. And then they said, I feel like this is a good summary of some of the problems that we're facing right now in tech. People have been sucked into centralized services by their convenience, and they have grown so large that the alternatives don't really exist in the eyes of users. Over time, everyone has grown to accept the constant stream of privacy issues and misinformation problems. Open source has been turned into something very convenient for large corporations instead of something benefiting the community. They exploit the free labor of overburdened maintainers and even pocket good PR for it.
Yeah. That's super important that like open source didn't really fulfill the promise that we kind of hoped it would. That like open source was basically a failure. Like it's commodified a certain kind of technology and made it accessible to folks who largely had access already, and we haven't really been vigilant about the necessary like both individual freedoms and systemic limits that are necessary to just have it mean anything for individuals. Like it's just become like icing on the cake for big corporations at this point. And it's, it's useful for nerds like you and me. Like I find it useful to have source code for stuff. I'm sure many of you find it useful to have source code for stuff, but like in general at the level of the entire society, that's just nothing. Like open source is basically a victory for corporations and close to useless for individuals at this point.
No. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I'm not sure I disagree either. Like, I think, like, I feel like part of what you're saying is like, engineers working in tech enjoy open source. That's a niche community. Mm-hmm. That doesn't really extend to the broader population.
Well, yeah, it's like we did this thing that's kind of interesting from this inside baseball perspective, but then like, we're telling ourselves it's like a global good for society when it doesn't actually do that. Like it's useful for ourselves in our niche community, and it can be exploited by plenty of corporations and other moneyed interests, but it's not generally useful for individual people. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in responding to this comment also. So Commodore 64 or 256 said that
PCB way.
The best way to reduce dependency on big tech is efficient software and efficient custom hardware, and they want to see something that's like PCBWay for ICs. So if anybody doesn't know, PCBWay is a company that you can pay. You give them a design and some money, and they ship you a bunch of circuit boards and probably, put a bunch of chemicals in the local water supply and just like generally use lots of epoxy and polymers and copper to make your design come to life. So like it's a PCB fab. Like they're taking resources and converting them into other forms of resources using capital. So you could do that for integrated circuits that basically already exists. It's just expensive because those objects are very resource intensive. So I don't know what you're really talking about. Like you could make integrated circuits as a particular like crystal of high resource consumption, easier to produce, but we still have the same problem that these are incredibly complicated and resource-intensive devices that individuals can't meaningfully design or produce anymore. Yeah, I guess Alexis is pushing back on that also and saying that open source has allowed a lot of people to reduce their dependence on corporate tech, just like for a much smaller definition of a lot than would be nice. I guess I'll buy that. But like a lot of people, like I feel like you and I on the internet, like doing computery stuff and hacking on code, like we probably use a lot more open source projects directly, whereas I don't know a lot of non-technical people who use open source. The closest thing I can think of is like Firefox, and it's not really meaningful to the average person who uses Firefox that Firefox is open source. It's more meaningful that it comes from a corporation that is generally trying not to abuse its powers, but to try to sort of take the edge off of that capitalism and use their powers to be not so evil. But like the politics of the company matter so much more than the actual license on the code. You can make custom PCBs in your garage. I mean, you can make anything if you have enough time and money in your garage, right? Like that's not really a useful metric.
So this same German user pointed out that to be GDPR compliant, if we're accepting email addresses on that website, we need a privacy page. So we're going to try to do that soon. But they also mentioned Lineage OS. Like they I don't think they're currently running it, but they would like to. Curious if anyone else is using Lineage OS or if they have thoughts on it.
I haven't remembered which phones this actually runs on. List of devices. It's a lot of devices. Yeah, I haven't really played with alternate ROMs in a while, but that might be really cool to get into, because I certainly don't like having a bunch of software from Google or Apple or whatever stuck on my phone, but it's also kind of hard to trust like random ROM packagers on the internet, because that's a very, very trusted piece of software, right? Like the operating system on your personal mobile device. So, my goal in installing any kind of open distro would be to have more trust rather than less trust. So there's that whole problem. Yeah, no, that you're right. Alexis is complaining that I'm calling people non-technical, and I didn't really mean that. I guess what I mean is people that don't spend most of their time fussing with technology for technology's sake. But like, it's more accurate to say people that don't have time to like configure their technology in a certain way, because like everybody's fussing with technology for like their work or something or other nowadays. It's just a question of priorities.
I feel like I used to have like a binary thinking like, oh, there's regular users and developers. And now I feel like it's more of a gradient where it's like there's like super non-technical people, then there's engineers or people like that. And then I think there's like power users in the middle who are maybe more ambitious. They might be willing to use open source software that has more rough edges. They might be willing to use a command line here and there. There's people in between.
That's cute. Looks like they've actually tried to have a methodical way of keeping the open source and the kind of unconstrained bits of binary junk separate from each other. That seems useful. Yeah, it could be. I mean, it might be interesting to do some more in-depth streams on like taking control back over your mobile device from the big mobile vendors. I'm curious if we went down that route, like what you'd be interested in seeing. Like, would you want to see like alternate ROMs for Androids like this? Would you want to see like kind of more like operating system independent stuff or Apple stuff or like app specific stuff? I'm definitely curious about that. Interesting. Platypus suggests that Lineage OS also has some problems with who owns it / runs it. That sounds slightly familiar, but I don't actually know what that would be. And then one report that from Alex that they like Lineage on their OnePlus 3, but they're biased and they like the kind of bare bones Android experience. I mean, I could see enjoying that too. I feel like when I first, like every time I get a new phone, it's like, I just want to try all the new things that'll run on this phone and see what works. But then it's like once I find out what I actually like, I feel like I usually have just like 4 or 5 apps I actually want. There's a lot of open source software that has just become ridiculously popular, and it's kind of hard to see what the benefit actually was. Like, I wonder where we would be if Linux didn't get so popular. Like, I have a hard time imagining that there would be no reasonably popular open source kernel, even if it wasn't like running everything. And even if open source wasn't the same shape as it currently is, it's hard to imagine that nobody would just like write their own operating system anymore. People always write their own operating system, and one of those would get big enough that more people would start using it. I mean, that's exactly how Linux started, as just hobbyists writing their own OSs. So, like, it's weird that we would, like, for in Linux's case at least, it's almost like weird to celebrate open source when, like, really the engine behind this is just like weird people who like writing operating systems in their free time. I like that comment about being torn between wanting to nuke all the corporate everything on their phone and just wanting to drop some baseband processors and documentation over into a place with some OSS nerds. That would be entertaining.
Alexis, I viewed source to try to figure out the new lines. It does look like they were deleted. I thought maybe they were preserved but then just not rendered as new lines, but it looks like they were actually deleted. It's a bummer.
Well, maybe by the next time we stream, I'll have the PeerTube server upgraded and we can try out this bleeding edge live stream that's written in JavaScript. Seriously, why?
Don't you already have your own custom streaming endpoint?
Yeah, that's the one. If you go to diode.zone live.diode.zone.
So that's on the domain diode.zone, but that's not PeerTube.
It's not PeerTube, but it's running on the same physical machine. So like, yeah, I've already got this set up. And I think PeerTube doesn't necessarily give me any more features at this point. It would let me automatically archive the stream afterwards. But I mean, I'm also kind of skeptical about like its transcoding quality. Like, I'd want to look at its options and stuff before just letting it archive the stream instead of doing it myself. Like, I don't trust. I mean, I was looking at it and I saw that they're encoding 1080p streams at like 2800 kilobits, which is just a bizarre default. Like, Twitch lets you go up to 3500 nowadays. So who picked 2800? Like, did anybody at at Framasoft or whatever choose that, or was it just random? These are the questions I have about their software. Okay, Node Media Server is the thing. That's a very ominous name too, doesn't it? Like, Node Media Server. Like why would you want this, and how does it exist? And as far as I can tell, it's all pure JavaScript. Gosh, this isn't even the right repo, is it? I guess this is a different thing that's not done yet, NMSv3. It's like somebody's rewrite that isn't complete yet. I think this is what they're actually running. So we've got, I think most of the actual network code that we're dealing with is node RTMP session. So like, this is what PeerTube is using right now. It's, look at that, we're packing RTMP chunk headers in JavaScript. Why the heck not? Are we allocating a new buffer for each function call to this? How many memory allocs per video packet do you think this has? Like, I'm sure it's running on the best allocator V8 can buy, but it's just amazing how much work the runtime has to go through to make this terrible code run quickly. And what's up with these hard-coded sample rates? Is that just for one audio codec? See, this every time I look at code in PeerTube or that code PeerTube depends on, I just have to hold back my astonishment. I'm like, wow, how is this even configured? Like, shouldn't we be using RAM to cache the entire segment? We've probably got multiple levels of cache here. Like, it looks like so group of pictures is like one keyframe. So I think there's a RAM-based cache in the JavaScript code for one GOP, one group of pictures. And then somewhere along the line that gets passed off to FFmpeg, and then FFmpeg is actually writing each intermediate stream to disk. So like if you read blogs about like Twitch's performance tuning or whatever, they're all like talking about how important it is to keep the data on this low latency path and, keep things in RAM all the time. And this is just like the opposite of that. It's like copy the data as many times as you want, put it in disk, and then fetch it off a disk. Right, GOP equals group of pictures will never be something I can burn into my brain either. Yes, Alexis, you're right. It's tough to have all these overloaded acronyms. You'd think that 3 letters should just be full by now. Yeah. So yeah, I'll probably install this code and just not like it. That's usually what I do. Well, did we have anything else to talk about? Or am I just rambling at this point?
I think we're good.
Cool. Colin suggests I could rewrite the backend with Rust or something. I mean, that's kind of already what I'm trying to do. I'm kind of taking a roundabout approach to it, but I've got this little proof of concept that I started at least to kind of explore some techniques. Go to my GitHub. It's called Rectangle Device right now. And this is not anything real. This is really just a proof of concept for a technique I was trying. The idea with this is that it would be a Rust-based daemon that would run kind of alongside whatever like application. So this could be integrated with PeerTube, it could be integrated with a PeerTube compatible video server, or just something completely different. And the idea is it's just a combination live plus video on demand streaming video server that can handle transcodes and integrates with IPFS for long-term storage. So the idea is you could run it standalone and just sort of send it RTMP video, take RTMP video, take HLS video, do real-time transcodes, basically the same stuff that PeerTube needs, and I would just be trying to implement that in a way that is hopefully a little bit more thoughtful and performant. But then I was also trying to do this thing where as soon as you ingest the video or transcode it, you take that chunk of video and format it right away so that it's compatible with IPFS. Which part of it is how the hash is formatted, part of it is the maximum size, just formatting things so that I can create these content addressable video playlists that can then be shared with IPFS servers. And so, IPFS is a building block that's used for a bunch of things. You can use it to send files slowly, you can use it to send files fast, you can use it to waste time with crypto, but like what I'm interested in using it for is just basically a low trust way of replicating large data sets incrementally. It actually seems to be a good protocol, at least in some basic ways, for doing that. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the long-term plan is to kind of write my own media server and then see what I can do with it, like stick it in PeerTube, stick it in a PeerTube competitor or whatever. Oh yeah, and then that also kind of brings me to that BandSox project I've been working on, so this rectangle device thing is my prototype for the media server and not really real or anything yet. But while I was starting to work on this, I realized that so I both wanted to have a container system for running transcodes for security purposes, but I also wanted to have that sort of for versioning and reproducibility purposes. So it seemed like a useful property for this media server if I can create a chunk of information which tells me everything that I need to know to reproduce a particular transcode and then throw away the actual transcode. And so this is still kind of experimental, but what I want to be able to do is have effectively a way of determining which streams need to be preserved and which streams are effectively caches. And then for those cache streams, I could reproduce them anytime using these transcode containers. So that's one thing that I want to do. I've already been prototyping this kind of thing using Podman. So the Rectangle Device project uses Podman, which is a very Docker-like container runtime system. It's not technically the runtime. The runtime is still something like runc, but Podman is basically the piece that will start and stop the containers and download them and all that. So I've been using that just to get this video server up and running. But there's just a bunch that I don't like about that. Like, I didn't see a way of making that easy to deploy inside of existing low privilege containers. Because even Podman, which doesn't require like a daemon or generally root access, still requires a bunch of kernel features that are not usable inside of an unprivileged Docker. So I wanted to try making a really simple user space only sandbox that only required fairly widely available kernel features like setcomp and ptrace. So that's what bandsocks is for. It's just a piece that I wanted to try building to make it easier to deploy like nested low privilege containers inside of an existing Rust process. Colin's wondering why that backend was even written in JavaScript if it's a backend. I mean, all of their backend is in JavaScript. It's just the flavor of the day. But yeah, it is a little weird to me too. But yeah, all of PeerTube is in JavaScript basically. Their front end is in JavaScript, their back end is in JavaScript. They use a whole bunch of JavaScript libraries to do media encoding, or not encoding, but remuxing. So yeah, they use FFmpeg for the actual transcodes and for most of the heavier weight media operations, but the client side remuxing is done in JavaScript, and now the RTMP remuxing and serving is done in JavaScript. So it is a strange world. Well, I was about to wrap up the stream, but Tuco just came in, so maybe we'll have a little bit of cat time before we completely go. Star of the show. Maybe I can get out of the way. Tuco, what do you want? Do you want to run? Tuco, running? Running time? No? Yes? Well, do you want to run? No? Wow. You just want more of that food that only comes in those weird little cans, huh? Do you want to run? Do you just want to rub up against my leg? Now you want to run? Or are you trying to get more food out of the trash can? I think he just wants food. Ah, Tuco. Oh, Tuk. He is so picky about this food. I feel like JavaScript is still a big improvement over Flash. Commodore 256 was reminiscing about Flash and JavaScript both being interchangeable boogeymen at some point. Tuco does have a precious voice. I've started to find some good strategies for tuning him out when I'm feeling especially auditorily sensitive. Colin adds that having consistent types in a monorepo is nice, but you wouldn't eat soup with a fork. I mean, it's funny because they don't even have a monorepo. Like, it's still a collection of many separate Node.js projects. I think it's mostly just that they like, you get a lot of ease of deployment when everything's written in the same language, so there's that. But I do feel like it's a bit extreme. Like, they use a separate binary for FFmpeg. I could understand using a Node.js RTMP server if it works well enough and they don't want to add any extra dependencies. But the thing that weirded me out was that they already use Nginx, and Nginx already has an RTMP plugin, so I don't know what's up with that. Like, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe the RTMP plugin is only in like bleeding edge versions of Nginx, but I was pretty sure it's been in mainline for a while now. Commodore says that the only difference between JavaScript and Flash is that JavaScript isn't monopolized by one company. I mean, JavaScript also started out as an open specification, whereas Flash was something that people had to reverse engineer. So there's that. Like, it's true that we have a dearth of intercompatible implementations right now. We've mostly got like 2 of them, but like in theory, there could be many implementations of JavaScript. It'd be much harder to do that with Flash because it was always intended to be sort of a idiosyncratic single implementation. I'm going to wrap this up any minute, but I mean, Tuco's just enjoying that gravy. This is his favorite part. He just licks the gravy off the top of the cat food, and then he comes back for the rest of it later. Yeah, I wouldn't end the stream while Tuco's eating. That would just be mean. I'm curious what this Node Media Server project was originally for. Like, I feel like I'm missing a bunch of the context of why this person made it, because a lot of the documentation's in Chinese. And I haven't tried translating or auto-translating or whatever. And who chose 2500 kilobits anyway, or 2800? Also, interpreted language are slow as hell. I mean, JavaScript is not really an interpreted language anymore. Python is more of an interpreted language than JavaScript. JavaScript has extremely modern compiler technology behind it nowadays. Yeah, I think a bunch of us can agree that modern websites are generally too heavy. I mean, it's like an age-old complaint, though. The software is too big these days. Software wasn't so big in the past. But, yeah, it would be nice if some of the sort of default frameworks that were trendy didn't just include so much of a kitchen sink. I mean, it's nice to see more people like trying to optimize their websites to be smaller, but there's also like so much less pressure to do that now than there used to be when people were on modems. Oh, are you complaining that JS isn't compiled because you disabled the JIT in your browser? I mean, that's kind of your own fault. Is that like the Firefox ESR included in Debian? I think I ran into that once. Like, I was trying to run a Grafana client or something on Firefox. Oh no, I was trying to run like a web scraper or something like that. I was trying to... That's right. I've got a web scraper that downloads like utility data from my power company portal. And I started running that on some server that had like the Firefox included in Debian, and it was built in a way that like disabled its JavaScript JIT. So I guess it increases reliability and security at the expense of lots of performance. And so it was just too slow to be usable. So even in that like server-side scraping situation, I had to like use a different build. Yeah, I mean, if you're going JITless on your browser, I commend you, but like that's not something that would work on many websites now. It's interesting. Like, what do you think the benefit is? Like, Is it because you really don't want to update your browser very often? Like why have a jitless JavaScript versus foregoing JavaScript entirely? Why not use links? I do miss that a lot of websites don't work in text browsers anymore. Oh yeah, Platypus mentions Iceweasel. Whatever happened with Iceweasel? Colin adds that with JavaScript, we just had to reverse engineer what the interpreter optimizations were all doing until WebAssembly happened. Yeah, I remember that. I had some fun writing ASM.js code by hand, though, a while ago. That was kind of a fun project. I mean, I feel like ASM.js was pretty enlightening, because even if you're not trying to target ASM.js specifically, it felt like an interesting guideline on how you write JavaScript in a way that the compiler is guaranteed to optimize effectively. So that was kind of interesting. Okay, another vote for ESR on Debian stable. That's interesting. There's a lot of code that I would run stable long-term releases of, but a browser is something that I would want more updated. But that's interesting. Oh yeah, I mean, I'm paying attention to both of the chats, but there's chat on Twitch and YouTube right now, and a little bit more on Twitch usually. Yeah, I did this thing, Zen Photon Garden, a while ago that was kind of fun, but it was like a assembly, like an ASM.js experiment. But I wasn't using any kind of special ASM.js tools. I was just writing the ASM.js. That was kind of fun. I mean, Alexis, I was kind of doing that. I was kind of just using the browser that my OS came with, and then I realized that my scraper was way too slow. But maybe instead of upgrading my browser, I should have just found a way to run my utility company's website without its heavyweight JavaScript. I did look into that actually, because I mean, I was writing a scraper, right? I was trying to figure out what layer of the protocol to intercept stuff at, and I think what was going on is that some of it was pretty straightforward. There were some endpoints where you just got some JSON with a table of utility info. I'm trying to have nice graphs of my power usage, right? So at some point you get some JSON with a table full of values, but I think the authentication was weird and custom. It looked like they were using some kind of weird proprietary authentication system, and it seemed easier to run their JavaScript than to reverse it. But that would have been nice if there was a more convenient way of just running that. I mean, with enough work, you could certainly just make something pretty custom, but I settled on just having the browser navigate to the page and then type the login information, basically. I think that's what I did. I think I just simulate typing the username and password, have the JavaScript log in for me, and then once I am actually at the data page that I want, then I can hook the RPC, the XML HTTP RPC or whatever, and just get the data I want. Wow, Tuku is actually not just eating the gravy; he's eating the whole container. I feel like this is rare. He hasn't gotten that far yet, but he likes licking the gravy off the foil and getting the meat bits out of the bottom of the plastic tin. Gosh, you can also see how chewed up that Ethernet cable is right behind him. I don't think it's good for him to have Ethernet cable in general, even if it's not connected, because it's probably not great for cats to chew on plastic, but I really have no way to keep him from chewing on cables, so I put a little bit of sacrificial cable on the floor in here, and he seems to have taken to it. Okay, Platypus clarifies that what killed Iceweasel was that Debian was allowed to use Firefox eventually. Ah, yes. Yeah, wasn't there some kind of trademark issue or some branding issue where they had to use the official Firefox binary or they couldn't use the name Firefox? Commodore says that in Lynx, the text browser, you can't even search for YouTube videos. You used to be able to use the search engine there and then get the URL and download it. Yeah, last time I looked at the YouTube client, it was just this super slow, heavy piece of JavaScript, like a megabyte or something, and just to get the page to do anything. Atsuko, are you done? Are you coming over here? Do you want to say goodbye on this side of the camera? Hey, boy. What? Hey, boy. He's so patient. I try to post pictures of this guy pretty regularly on his Twitter. It's been scrolling up there this whole time, but if you go to @tuco_the_cat, there's always fresh pictures of Tuke. Oh, I think I'm actually going to wrap this up. Thanks so much for stopping by. Thanks for filling out the survey. Thanks for chatting with us and giving us input. And a special thanks to everyone who's been contributing to the show and putting in a couple of bucks a month on Patreon to help us pay the bills. That's been helping us keep this going, and I've been trying to stream regularly and show my appreciation for folks. So if you have any thoughts about what you'd like to see more of or less of, please send me a message. You can reach me on the various social things up there, on the Twitters, on the emails, I think you can even send me messages on PeerTube these days. Oh, we got some spam right here just in time to delete it for the very end of the stream. All right. Happy hacking, everyone. I'll see you all next time.